I went to my local Micro Center, which is a really cool place that has a lot of GPUs. Very few places in the world are going to have a selection that you just walk in and it's glass cases filled with GPUs. It's also a pretty interesting place to see what's going on with the GPU market as a whole. Now, don't get me wrong, during the great GPU shortage, a lot of people were mad they didn't have a Micro Center near them, and it was true. Micro Center is where you would get a lot of launch GPUs, and a lot of stock was certainly available. If somebody lived in a different country or perhaps even in a different state, hard to get certain GPUs unless you have to go online or pay a scalper as it was back in the day. But now, what happens if I go into a Micro Center? We know that not that many people are buying GPUs. Which ones are they actually buying and which ones are really staying on the shelf? And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. First, let's take a look at this pile over here. These are like the open box GPUs, so people return them for whatever reason. There's a few oddities in here, like you'll still see some 3080 Ti's, for example. One was more expensive than the other, and of course, both are just way too expensive considering what you can get now. Even though the GPUs are expensive, they're going to be around that price, like for a 4070 Ti, and I don't really know that a 3080 Ti has any argument against that, especially with the DLSS 3. A little bit better power consumption, and generally a 4070 Ti is going to perform better overall. So what exactly do you get if you do an open box GPU? There is a variety of open box GPUs, of course. Sometimes you'll have a 4090, and sometimes you'll have these older GPUs, like I've even seen a 2060 before, and I don't know, is it worth it? I know GPUs definitely last a pretty long time, and especially from a store that has a good return policy. It's not like you're buying from somebody off the street, but you're paying pretty high prices. Now, as we look at other GPUs that are available, you can imagine pretty much everything's in stock. As I spoke to the people there, the people that work there, they said that they do sell a decent amount of 4070s, even 4070 Ti, believe it or not. I know that's a GPU I've jumped on before because it's only 12 gigabytes of VRAM and it has certain issues, but if you think about it, that's certainly the most affordable, if you will, of like the high-end NVIDIA GPUs. What's after a 4070 Ti? You're talking about a 4080, which is like $1,200 and above. There have been sales closer to $1,000, but it's still over $1,000. 4070 Ti, you can get it, in that $800 range, which, although it's still expensive, certainly is cheaper than the more expensive GPU. What's pretty funny is that they're still selling a decent amount of 4090s, nowhere near before, but if somebody comes in with a big budget, obviously, and they just want the best GPU, that GPU still sells. Nobody's really going for the 4080. That GPU has certainly been one of the lowest demands GPUs that it seems. And then some of the other like newer GPU launches seem to be having a hard time, like the 4060 Ti, especially the 16 gigabyte version. I mean, I did go in there, honestly, to buy a 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte version, but that's because I want to test it so I can show you guys some results and some numbers. That's a GPU that actually not many reviewers even got. I don't think anybody got it, as a matter of fact, even the bigger channels. And if you look around, it's not one that the information is widely available. So 4060 Ti, 8 gigabytes is really, really tight nowadays. Even, the 1080p, you're going to have some issues once in a while. So the 16 gigabyte one is interesting, but the price really makes it something that I cannot recommend. I'm just curious for science, if you will, how that GPU performs against an 8 gigabyte GPU. It's actually a pretty decent area to make the argument for more VRAM or not, and if it really makes a difference, and at what resolution, what games, does it start to actually matter. That's why I've been actually gaming. I have a 8 gigabyte 4060 Ti currently here. Then I have another system with a 16 gigabyte one. I've been going back and forth and seeing if I can notice a difference. One major thing is that you definitely see that VRAM allocation over 12 gigabytes all the time. You see it at like 13 gigabytes, 14, depending on the game. Now, this is at 1440p. that I'm testing. Obviously, you're going to have much lower, allocation and VRAM usage if you're at 1080p, but still 1440p is a pretty widely available, a class of monitors that's not too expensive anymore. And if you're paying $400 or $500 for a GPU, you're probably going to have a decent monitor, at least that may not be 1080p. Not that 1080p monitors aren't decent. Most people want to upgrade to a 1440p or something like that. So what about AMD GPUs? They have a whole row here as well for AMD GPUs, and much of the same. You see a lot of, still kind of high prices and a lot of 7900X TXs. And of course, you're going to have like the little bit lower end, like the 7600 and some other GPUs like that. But AMD seems to sell like a lot less. And this has always been the case. Even during the great GPU shortage, you would often find the NVIDIA side completely empty of GPUs, but then you would have a bunch of AMD GPUs that nobody wanted to buy, and they were still way too expensive. They never lowered those prices. So now it's hard to tell if people just aren't buying in general, or if they wouldn't buy it anyway because it was maybe a little bit higher priced AMD. They do have to keep their price extremely competitive with NVIDIA for people to really have an incentive, to go to that side, or else people are just going to pick up the NVIDIA GPU, since NVIDIA does have that big mind share still amongst gamers, even though obviously people complain about the pricing and things like that. So, looking around, almost any GPU that you want. They even had a 4090 Strix AIO for like $21.99 on the shelf. Ridiculously expensive. If you're going to buy a 4090, just get a Founders Edition and save $500. So they have pretty much everything now. If you want a 4070, they have that. 4070 Ti's. They have a decent, selection of these GPUs in stock. The question is, people really want to pay these prices? The prices themselves are what's high, period. That's partly the reason why they're just not really selling that well. Almost every GPU should be cheaper at this point. The 4070, 4070 Ti, they're all overpriced by $100 minimum, maybe a little bit more. And the proof is people just aren't buying them in any really significant numbers, and the prices just jumped up way too much. All right, guys, so this was just a little bit of a look in one of my, local stores, see what's going on. How's it looking like where you live? Have you seen the GPUs be pretty stagnant? I bet you probably have. Prices and availabilities kind of like, not really moving too much. Let me know what you think down below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.